Yo, what's good, Cowboys Nation? Welcome back to the channel for today's Mailbag episode where I answer your questions about everything Dallas Cowboys. Before we dive into all your questions about Caleb Downs, George Pickens, the draft, and everything else, if you're not subscribed to this channel yet, what are you waiting for? Smash that subscribe button right now and hit that notification bell so you never miss any Cowboys content. Give this video a thumbs up. Drop your own questions in the comments for the next mailbag, and let's get into what you guys are asking about. Today's Cowboys mailbag is presented by Prize Picks, so stick around because I'll tell you how you can win some cash while watching your favorite sports. All right, let's jump right into the questions because we've got a ton to get through today. First question comes from Austin Connor with a super thanks, and he asks, remember Minkah Fitzpatrick being terrible when the Dolphins put him at nickel, and then he went to Pittsburgh and played deep safety and became elite? Is there any risk of Caleb Downs not being at his best playing in the nickel for Dallas? Great question, Austin, and I appreciate the super thanks. Here's my answer. I'm not worried about that scenario playing out with Caleb Downs at all. First of all, I think Downs is a great fit for the nickel position, specifically in Christian Parker's defensive scheme. The comparison to Minkah is understandable and it's a valid concern on the surface, but there are some key differences. Part of the issue with Minkah in Miami was that he was actually playing like actual outside corner at times, which is just not a good spot for a safety. That's not his skill set, and it showed in his struggles. I would also point out that Minkah Fitzpatrick played a ton of nickel at Alabama during his college career, like a massive amount of it, even more nickel snaps than Caleb Downs played in college. So while I understand the comparison and the concern is legitimate, I'm just not too worried about it with Downs. His skill set translates perfectly to what Parker wants to do, and I think we're going to see him thrive in that role from day one. Next question comes from Space Brain Jesus, and this is hilarious. He says, please do a kickstand if we get Downs at pick 12. Now, a lot of these questions came in before the Downs pick actually happened, so this was when everyone was hoping we'd get him. I'm going to cheat a little bit here and say, well, we avoided it because we actually got Caleb Downs at number 11, not 12, so technically I don't have to do a kickstand. But man, I was ready to celebrate however it went down. By the way, we did make those Downs to Dallas t-shirts that a bunch of you ordered, and looking at the live chat from the show, it seems like several of them arrived today in the mail. So I'm glad to hear people are getting their shirts and rocking that Downs to Dallas gear. If you still want to get your shirt, you can grab one at chatsports.com/Downs, and I'll put that link in the comments section and the description of today's show so you can easily find it. Next up, Matt Temple says, Cowboys should sign Cuse Campbell. He wanted them to sign him for the last decade. He'd be a great leader in the locker room. Unfortunately, Matt, Cuse Campbell did sign with a team on Thursday after your super chat came in, but it wasn't Dallas. He signed with the Baltimore Ravens, so he's going back to a team he's comfortable with and played for before. I have a feeling he's just doing his thing where he re-signs with teams that he liked previously and played for. He'll probably end up in Jacksonville or somewhere random the year after this somehow. That seems to be his pattern. But I do agree with you, Matt. He would have been a solid veteran addition. He ended up going back to Baltimore, though, so he's going to spots where he's comfortable and familiar. $10 super thanks from William Cook. And this is a great question that came in before Pickens officially signed his franchise tag. William asks, I wonder if Pickens and his agent realize the Cowboys are the best situation he can find himself in. Who else has a Dak-caliber quarterback or the draft capital to trade for him and pay him? This was asked before the Cowboys officially had Pickens sign the franchise tag, which he has now done, so that changes the equation a bit. But to answer your question, William, I do think at some point Pickens and his agent looked around the league and realized Dallas really is the best situation for him. Not every team has a quarterback like Dak Prescott who can get him the ball and maximize his talents. Not every team is willing to give up draft capital and then immediately pay him $40 million a year. So yeah, I think that reality set in. Matt Temple also asks, are you willing to bet Pickens will hold out, doesn't show up for camp, be rusty, and then get mad at the organization? We'll get at best a third-round compensatory pick and need a new number 2 receiver. Okay, so that scenario could still partially play out even now that Pickens signed the tag. But I feel way better about the entire situation now that he's actually put his signature on that franchise tag tender. I think there is a pretty big difference between signing the tag right at the draft versus signing it afterward like he did. Here's the thing, there's no real benefit to Pickens signing the franchise tag after the draft from his perspective. It actually takes away his leverage. He now has to show up for all mandatory activities or he gets fined substantial amounts of money. He has no control over where he goes if the Cowboys decide to trade him. He can't help dictate the terms of a potential trade and figure out where he's going to end up. The Cowboys can trade him now, technically, but if they aren't actively shopping him around the league, which they've said repeatedly they're not, then it doesn't really mean anything. So hopefully there's no drama moving forward. He's locked in financially. He shows up to everything. He has a great year for Dallas. And then next offseason, when they try to get a long-term deal done, it's going to cost $4, $5, or $6 million more per year than it would have this year. If Pickens absolutely balls out again and puts up similar or better numbers, then $40 million per year absolutely comes into the conversation for his market value. Let me ask you guys this. What's your concern level over George Pickens on a scale from 1 to 10? 1 being you're not concerned at all. 10 being you think this is going to blow up in our faces. Let me know in the comments section of today's show where your concern level is at. Next question from Joshua Orrs. Why Devin Moore over Keon Scott? For those who don't know, that's the Florida cornerback Devin Moore versus the Miami nickel corner Keon Scott. And the positions they play matter a lot in this evaluation. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Keon Scott as a prospect. If the Cowboys hadn't taken Caleb Downs in round 1, I think Keon Scott very much would have been in serious play for the Dallas Cowboys, potentially as soon as that 3rd round pick or even earlier than that. But here's the key difference. Caleb Downs is going to play a ton of nickel corner for this defense in Christian Parker's scheme. Keon Scott, in my evaluation, can really only play nickel corner. I think that's a big reason why he fell as far as he did in the draft. If you didn't specifically need a nickel corner, Scott does not offer the safety or outside corner flexibility that teams were looking for. That lack of versatility helped lead to his slide down the board. Devin Moore is an outside corner who can play on the boundary. You don't need 2 top 115 picks spent on nickel corners when you're not going to play that much dime defense. There's a lack of positional flexibility involving Keon Scott when you already have Caleb Downs who can play nickel. So it's less about the overall talent level, because I do think you're right that Scott might be the better pure player. But the schematic fit and the positional versatility, I think there was a pretty big difference there that made Moore the better pick for what Dallas needs. Before I continue with more questions, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Prize Picks. The playoffs are here for basketball and hockey, baseball season is underway, and it's the perfect time to cash in with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app and the best place to win cash while watching sports. The app is really easy to use, even if you've never done anything like this before. You just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. For example, I've got a lineup here with Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott. And this one's going to come true eventually. More than 2 Dak Prescott passing touchdowns and more than 300 Joe Burrow passing yards. It's a 3 times power play, so you put in $20 and win 60 if it hits. With the new social feeds feature, you can share your Prize Picks lineups with your friends and copy lineups with a single click. That includes myself and producer AP. You can follow us on Prize Picks, tail our picks, or fade them if you think we're wrong, and you get to see the picks before they even get posted on the show. New user offer. Download the Prize Picks app today with the link in the comments and the description, and use code HMA to get $50 in bonus lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code HMA to get $50 after you play just $5. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, back to your questions. Cool Sharky with a $2 super thanks asks, do you think Jerry hung up with Philadelphia and called the Steelers to say, hey, Philly's offering such and such. Can you offer something comparable to flip our picks? And then maybe they take Malachi Lawrence if they weren't set on him. So here's the background on this. The Steelers were absolutely going to take Malachi Lawrence with that pick. I feel pretty confident about that information from what I've heard. That was going to be the pick for Pittsburgh. I don't think the Steelers were going to offer the same level of draft capital that Philly did to move up. And sometimes it gets kind of shady when you're using teams as leverage against each other. If Dallas called Philadelphia and said, hey, do you want to make a trade here? It would be a little risky to then use the Eagles as leverage to try to get more from Pittsburgh. There's also a time limit involved. You don't have that much time to really have a true bidding war the way you could if there were 20 minutes on the clock or something. So I don't have any real issues with how the Cowboys approached that trade in round one. I think they got good value and made the right call. GKD Records and the DL stands for deadline, which I somehow missed when the super chat first came in, says they will keep the Pickens drama alive until week 1 or the trade deadline. You're probably right. Someone will bring it up around minicamp, whether he's there or not. They'll bring it up at training camp, whether he's there or not. They'll bring it up week 1. They'll bring it up at the trade deadline. It's just how it goes with these situations. I told you guys they were going to bring it up during the draft, and it got a little bit more real than I thought it was going to get at that time. But this stuff always gets brought up repeatedly until it's completely resolved. William Cook asks, what are your realistic expectations for Caleb Downs as a rookie? Great question. I think Caleb Downs is going to be a day one starter, and that's actually a bit more rare than I think people tend to realize, especially at the safety position. I don't know if he's going to have a Pro Bowl level stat sheet impact in terms of raw numbers, but I do think a potential Pro Bowl level overall impact when you're watching the film and seeing how he unlocks so many different elements of the Cowboys defense is absolutely possible. Heck, I think there's a real possibility that he's the best defensive back on this entire roster when the season is over. I genuinely think that is a very real outcome for Caleb Downs. And I'm allowing myself to get a little bit high on the hopium now that he's actually in Dallas wearing the star. My expectations are super high, and I'm not afraid to say it. Couple rapid fire draft questions here. Someone asks, Trotter or Perkins at pick 92? Undeniably would have been Josiah Trotter, and that's how the NFL felt too. There was a huge gap between those two players in terms of evaluation. Alex asks, if the top players were wiped out, would you have reached on Emeka Egbuka and hoped Tyler Freifogel would fall, or vice versa? Thank God there are no offensive linemen named Tyler in this scenario. I probably would have gone receiver first, but I don't know if the Cowboys would have done that. That's a tough call. Jonathan Kelly says, hope we land one of the big 6 defensive players without trading up. Does moving up one spot count? I don't think so, but we got what we wanted in Caleb Downs, so I'm not complaining. Jonathan Williams references my final mock draft and says, good call without trading up, by the way. Appreciate all the work you put in for the draft. Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. There was a lot of work that went into the draft coverage. I was up until 1 a.m, multiple nights, after putting the kids down at 8 p.m., then working for 5 more hours afterward, getting all the content ready and making sure we had notes on everybody. I've got detailed notes on Anthony Smith, who we took in the 7th round, notes on every single pick. So thank you for noticing the effort. If you have not already subscribed, hit that sub button right now. YouTube.com, Cowboys TV. Let's keep growing this community. Anthony asks, which corners make the final roster if you had to guess? The locks are Devin Moore, Darren Bland, Shavon Revel, Caleb Downs, and Kobe Durant. Those 5 guys are making the roster without question. That leaves maybe 6 or possibly 7 corners total if you want to have some extra bodies given the injury concerns for some of those first 5 guys. That means Reddy Stewart, Kalen Carson, Darian Kendrick, Josh Butler, Tricky's Bridges, Zion Childress, and I guess technically Corey Valentine are all fighting for maybe 2 roster spots barring injuries. That's a lot of talented guys that are going to get cut, unfortunately. Maybe Stewart helps you enough on special teams that he sticks around as a backup nickel. Maybe Carson makes it. It's tough to predict. There's going to be a lot of change in that room. Elliot, with a $10 super chat, says, I'm telling you, my prediction for Pickens is coming true. He'll play the tag this year and next year get a big bag if he kicks ass again. One important note on this, the Cowboys have a rather affordable franchise tag option for George Pickens next year that is well below what an actual long-term extension would cost. If Pickens balls out the way he did this year, my predicted deal value of around $34 million per year, that begins with a 4. But next year, if he balls out the way I think he's going to, and hopefully he does, that number jumps significantly. Someone asks, is Shavon Revel going to start at corner? I think he's going to have to earn it. I think Kobe Durant will have a real potential path to starting this upcoming season. A lot of it comes down to, can Revel stay healthy? Can Christian Parker keep him healthy and help him be the guy that we all think he can be? I think you want him to start, but it's not going to be a guarantee or a promise this year. Do you think Revel starts at corner this upcoming season? Y for yes, N for no. Let me know in the comments. William Cook makes a great point. I don't see a better situation for Pickens than the Cowboys. He has Dak and a structure that would allow him to be successful. I completely agree, and maybe that's part of why we haven't seen any of the nuclear options getting pulled from the Pickens camp. As uncomfortable as the past week was before he officially signed that tag, which I do feel way better about now, the problem for Pickens is that his perception around the NFL is one of problems. Yeah, he's missed meetings. He's not always locked in. He causes some drama. He does stupid stuff sometimes that frustrates coaching staffs. That perception exists around the league, and not every team is willing to throw $37 million per year and draft picks at a player with that reputation. I think that's why if you're Pickens, you have to show up to everything. If you start skipping stuff and trying to hold out and playing games, that does not help your perception at all, fair or not. So if I were advising Pickens, especially now that he's signed the tag, I'd say show up to everything, be a model teammate, ball out, cash in next year, and if everything is good behind the scenes, then if you really need to, you can pull out the pay me or trade me card next offseason. But Dallas is absolutely the best spot for Pickens if he's going to spend 1 year somewhere. F. Jerry asks, Tan Holden is a roster lock, right? No, guys, I know everyone liked him last offseason and during last preseason, but Holden was not close to making the 53-man roster last year. He wasn't really in that conversation. There's a reason why nobody picked him up off waivers either. The perception of him wasn't that great coming out of Oregon, and he didn't have huge interest as an undrafted free agent. Now he has a chance to become wide receiver 5 or 6 on the depth chart. That is possible for him, but he's going to have to prove it. He is by no means a lock. He's one of 5 or 6 guys fighting for those 1 or 2 remaining receiver spots. Will Tan Holden make the roster? 1 for yes, 0 for no. Drop it in the comments. Kerna says, never felt true hatred till David Mulugeta, who is Pickens' agent. Remember, we're not supposed to like him. That's actually a great point. The fans and teams are not supposed to like the agent. That is not the agent's job. The agent's job is to maximize his client's earnings. And Mulugeta does a very good job of that. That just doesn't mean we have to like it as fans, because the NFL has set up a system where we as fans are incentivized to want players on team-friendly contracts to save cap space. It's why I appreciate when teams are aggressive and actually spend more cash, because that allows them to go add more quality players on bigger contracts. All right, Cowboys Nation, that's going to wrap up today's mailbag. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in questions and super chats. I really appreciate the support. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop your own questions in the comments for the next mailbag episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. How about them Cowboys?